When you're a solo indie dev, you basically are the whole team. Beta tester, that's you. Docs writer, you again. Product manager, yep, still you. And probably your own barista too. Honestly, it can feel exhausting just trying to keep all those hats balanced. But recently, I stumbled across something pretty fascinating. Anthropic shared this internal breakdown of how their teams use Claude Code, and it wasn't the typical flashy AI does magic pitch. Instead, it was about practical habits, real team rituals, the kind of workflows that help actual teams ship faster and smarter, but adapted specifically for AI. And it got me thinking, as solo devs, what if we borrowed some of those rituals for ourselves? Could Claude realistically step into the role of a junior developer or your designer, your debugger, even your product coach? Well, I got curious, and that's exactly what I've been experimenting with. So in this video, I'm going to share what I've learned by remixing Anthropic's team playbook into a solo-friendly workflow, section by section, with practical examples from my own indie iOS projects. Let's dive in. Real quick, I'm Daniel. I've been building iOS apps for about 8 years now, mostly freelancing and shipping stuff for clients. But since Dub 25, I've decided to go all in on solo development. Started building apps in public, and yeah, I'm still figuring out this personal brand thing as I go. But more on that in another video. So, one of the worst parts of solo dev life is trying to remember what you were thinking. 2 months ago, you open up an old project, and suddenly it's like, wait, why did I write this function this way? What's that weird Firebase rule again? How did I set up my scripts for local builds? It's that moment where you wish you could just slack your past self. This is where the Anthropic teams do something surprisingly simple, but honestly kind of genius. They keep a file in every repo called CLAUDE.md. Think of it as a living how things work around here doc. Not for other people, but for the AI. Every odd setup, every, hey, watch out for this, gotcha, even just your preferred code style, it all goes in there. As a solo iOS dev, this has been such a relief. Instead of trying to juggle all those tiny details in your head, you start dropping them into Claude.md. So next time you come back to a project after, let's be honest, completely forgetting everything you did, you've got your own onboarding doc waiting for you. And even better, Claude can instantly pick up on your personal habits, your weird shell scripts, your Swiftlint preferences, all of it. And the best part, Claude reads this doc every time you start a session. You can update it as you go. Sometimes I'll even tell Claude, hey, can you add a note to the Claude.md that I need to reset Firestore security rules and debug builds? It's wild. I'm literally outsourcing my own habits back to myself. What I really love is how this isn't meant to be perfect or finished. The teams at Anthropic just keep iterating on their Claude.md, adding new stuff when Claude gets confused, highlighting important tricks, making the doc work better as their workflow evolves. It's this living document, not some big homework assignment you have to nail in one sitting. Here's something I've started doing. I keep a global Claude.md in my home folder with all my universal Swift iOS quirks, like always prefer structs or Swift UI previews on everything, and then project-specific ones for all those one-off setups or client requirements. Claude just merges the two together. It's actually kind of magical. Since I started treating Claude.md as my personal cheat sheet, I spend way less time scratching my head or digging through old Slack DMs. All those, wait, how do I? Moments just kind of fade away. So if you're only going to try one thing from this section, let it be this. Start a Claude.md for your next Swift project, even if it's just a few notes. Trust me, your future self will thank you, and Claude will too. And yeah, the part of solo dev life that gets old fast is the constant switching between builder, tester, and code reviewer all inside your own head. If you treat Claude like some vending machine, give me a feature, please work, it almost always disappoints. But if you take a beat and actually loop Claude into the real development cycle, things get weirdly productive. Here's what that looks like for me now. I start every feature or bug fix with explore and plan mode. I'll ask Claude to read something like session editor view.swift and just summarize how it handles drag and drop. I don't want code yet, just a plan. A quick explainer that saves me from breaking things by diving in headfirst. It's honestly a relief, because that old fix the bug, oops, made it worse routine, gone. Once there's a plan, I take the Anthropic approach to TDD, but honestly, it's even faster. I'll have Claude write unit tests for the edge cases I care about. Say, make sure QR code manager.swift handles empty input and network errors. And only after those are in, then I let Claude write the code to pass them. This avoids the classic overfitting trap or missing something obvious just because I was moving too fast. Plus, I can tell Claude to double check its own solution, and it'll usually spot things I missed. But the real power move for me is using Claude as a code reviewer, not just a generator. Sometimes I'll write a big chunk of code myself, then ask Claude, hey, scan this PR for anything off. Code style, accessibility, stuff that's easy to miss. It's feedback, but I'm still in the driver's seat. No surprise refactors, just a friendly nudge if I overlook an accessibility label. The icing on the cake? Claude can actually handle the boring bits, the git commits, writing out descriptive messages, even prepping pull requests. It's not glamorous work, but offloading it means I spend less time writing fix typo in profile view.swift and more time actually building cool stuff. Honestly, this whole Claude as junior dev plus reviewer loop makes the process way more fun. There's less mental friction, more creativity, and I end up feeling like I have a teammate. Even if I'm just working in my living room at 2 a.m., there's something freeing about knowing you can ask for a plan, get your tests written, and get a fresh set of eyes on your work, all without leaving the flow of building. And yeah, sometimes Claude misses edge cases or doesn't totally get my style, but I treat that like mentoring a new teammate. I keep my style guide handy, sometimes paste it right into the chat and keep steering things back on track. It's a back and forth, not just a button press. If you've ever wanted to feel like you had a little more support, a junior dev who's always ready to help, never tired of writing tests, and never too proud to admit they're confused, this workflow honestly changes the solo game. Give it a try and see if you can unlock that feeling of having a real team behind you, even when you're still solo. Debugging. Every solo dev's least favorite recurring nightmare. Debugging as a solo dev is basically a recurring horror movie. It's always midnight, you're out of coffee, and the only person around to ask for help is you. That's when the bug hits. You know, the one that makes 0 sense, pops up at the worst time, and just refuses to die. This is actually where the Anthropic approach with Claude really shines for me. Their teams don't just use Claude to crank out code. They lean on it for interactive troubleshooting, almost like having a tireless pair programming buddy. The difference is this buddy has already read your Claude.md, remembers every weird edge case, and doesn't get tired or judge you for not knowing why your sum view isn't conforming to a protocol. When I'm deep in bug territory, I'll just paste the error logs, crash reports, or even a gnarly stack trace right into Claude. Sometimes I'll straight up ask, what are 3 likely reasons this crash is happening? Or if it's one of those classic inscrutable Swift UI errors, I'll have Claude walk through what it thinks is happening and ask it for debug steps. Not just fix it, but what would you check next? Honestly, it feels like having an extra brain on call. It gets even more powerful when I let Claude look at scripts or test harnesses. I can say, run this bash script, look for where it fails, or ask it to summarize a massive test log and spot where things first go off the rails. If I'm feeling bold, sometimes I'll even let Claude run a script locally with lots of guardrails, obviously, just to automate those repetitive checks that I never want to do by hand. A real example, my QR apps scan analytics broke after a refactor and I couldn't figure out why. I dumped my Firebase logs and a couple screenshots into Claude, then asked it to analyze what might be going wrong. I got back a solid theory that literally would not have occurred to me at 1 a.m., and it ended up being right. One of the underrated perks here, Claude doesn't care if you ask what feels like a dumb question. No ego, no exhaustion. It'll give you as many takes as you need. And for me, that means fewer wild goose chases and more, oh, that's what broke moments. Quick tip though, don't go full YOLO on permissions. Only let Claude run scripts or tools you actually trust. And if you're doing something wild, do it in a dev container where you can safely roll things back. That saved me more than once. Bottom line, solo devs have to wear every hat, especially when things break. But with Claude, you can offload the late night, headbanging debugging to an AI teammate who never sleeps and genuinely wants to help. Makes a huge difference. All right, nothing destroys solo dev momentum like losing your flow. You know what I mean? You sit down hoping to crank out a new feature, and before you know it, you're juggling 5 tabs, scrolling through old Slack messages to yourself, and falling down the rabbit hole of, wait, how did I set this up again? Flow gone, focus scattered, and suddenly it's an hour later and the code still isn't shipping. What I love about Anthropic's playbook is how they intentionally design for flow, and you can totally steal these moves as a solo dev. First, I'll get Claude to generate a quick checklist for whatever big thing I'm about to tackle. It's like having a tech lead over your shoulder, but one who actually listens. Hey Claude, I want to refactor onboarding manager.swift, map out the files and steps I need. Suddenly I have a roadmap and not just a cloud of anxiety. Context is everything for focus, and Claude helps here too. If my chat session is getting noisy, logs everywhere, old code snippets, too much random back and forth, I'll just clear the session and repaste only the bits that matter. It's like resetting the whiteboard mid-sprint. Suddenly Claude is sharp again, and so am I. And for those big, messy indie projects, you can even break work into little sub-agents. One Claude handles UI stuff, another is on back-end, another tests. Most days I don't need this, but when I'm juggling a feature and a refactor and a widget at the same time, it actually feels like I have a tiny virtual team I can boss around. Then there's the Git side. Claude's honestly become my co-pilot for searching through Git history, suggesting cleaner commit messages, running pre-push checks, basically all the little bits that usually fall through the cracks when it's just me at 1 a.m. It's not just about code. It's about the rituals that keep you moving. This shows up in tiny ways in my own workflow. If I'm breaking apart a gnarly Swift UI view, I'll have Claude analyze it, list all the dependencies and state, and suggest ways to split it up. Or when I hit a wall, why won't this animation trigger? I'll just ask for a flow breakdown. Why, and 9 times out of 10, the explanation is all I need to get unstuck. Honestly, my favorite thing is just starting the day with a summary. I'll send Claude the diff from yesterday, ask what's next if I want to ship a widget by the end of the week, and boom, I've got a plan. It's basically a stand-up, except the only person there is me, and I actually get useful advice. That's the magic of bringing Claude into your product loop as a flow guard. It won't write the app for you, but it will absolutely help you stay in flow, skip the tab hopping, and punch through those "where was I again" moments. For solo devs, that's everything. Let's just say it. Most solo devs are also moonlighting as their own designer, whether we like it or not. And it's honestly wild how many hats you have to wear. You're doing Figma, wrestling Swift UI, thinking about color, spacing, accessibility, and just hoping your app feels right in that sort of sixth sense way that comes with experience. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you just kind of squint and ship it. But here's the cool part. Claude's not just about cranking out code. I've started using it as a sort of instant design buddy. I'll paste in a Figma export or even a messy screenshot and say, okay, what would this look like in Swift UI? How would you lay this out? And can you check for accessibility? Make sure dynamic type isn't totally broken. Maybe suggest a tweak or two, and it'll actually come back with legit suggestions, sometimes even showing me how Apple does something similar in settings or reminders. One thing I lean on all the time is color and typography help. If I've got a rough brand palette, Claude can spit out a whole Swift color enum or typography set, all named semantically, which is huge when you're trying to keep things clean and future proof. It's like having a style guide generator on call. Whenever I get stuck on the "is this flow weird?" Question, like should the edit button go on the top right or just live in line, I'll ask Claude to weigh the options. It's kind of hilarious. Sometimes the answer is there's no single rule, but here's what Apple usually does. And suddenly I've got more confidence to make a call. Microcopy is another one. I'll prompt Claude for friendlier error messages or help coming up with better empty states, especially when I'm too close to the code to see what a new user might find confusing. It's fast, and it honestly saves me from shipping another error failed label. And yeah, accessibility. Claude's not perfect, but it'll spot missing labels, warn about touch targets, and at least get me thinking about stuff I might skip when I'm rushing. That alone makes the handoff to users, or even to myself in 6 months, way smoother. Here's a real moment. When I rebuilt my QR dashboard, I dropped a mock-up into Claude and said, roast this for touch targets and iPad clarity. The feedback wasn't just make it bigger. It gave me specific advice about spacing, button order, and even a pointer about where to add an extra gesture for iPad users. You know, those little nudges that just make a UI feel done? So if you ever get that, am I actually designing or just duct taping screens together feeling? Treat yourself to a Claude design handoff. Play both roles, let the AI break the tie and see what happens. Sometimes the answer is obvious, sometimes it's wild, but it always pushes the work a little further. That's what makes it a legit secret weapon for solo devs. Let's be real. Security is one of those things that can sneak up and bite you after you ship. And when you're solo, you can't just tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, did I just commit an API key? For me, the old approach was basically move fast and pray nothing breaks. But that's not exactly a workflow, right? What I love about how Anthropic's teams use Claude is that they actually bake safety into their process, not just code generation. I've totally stolen that habit. Now, before I let Claude run anything wild, I'm strict about permissions. I only allow it to execute scripts I trust, and every session gets its own little permission sandbox. It's kind of like having bumpers in a bowling alley. I can experiment and automate without the fear of nuking my whole system. For the riskier, repetitive stuff, like batch renaming files, cleaning up warnings, or running a new deployment script, I'll spin up a local dev container and give Claude free reign inside that safe box. It's what I call safe YOLO mode. Automate like crazy, but with a parachute. Even if things go sideways, a quick reset puts everything back to normal. One of my favorite tricks is having Claude review my recent commits for security gotchas. scan my last 5 commits and flag anything risky, secrets, credentials, weird shell commands. It's caught stuff I definitely would have missed, especially after a late night coding spree. And for deployment scripts, Fastlane CI, basically anything that could brick production or wipe out data, I'll let Claude audit the script before I run it. I just ask, flag anything dangerous, irreversible, or dumb. It's like having a slightly paranoid ops engineer checking my work, which, honestly, is what I need most. I also keep a running log in my Claude.md of exactly what Claude's allowed to touch in each repo, which scripts are safe, which tools it can use, and why. That way, if I ever hand a project off or just come back months later, there's a record. Future me, or anyone else, knows exactly what's safe, what's off limits, and why. The real magic? I'm way less nervous to try new things now, because if I want to run something experimental, I know I can test it in a controlled way and have Claude double check my logic before anything hits main. It's a massive peace of mind upgrade for solo devs, especially if you've ever had that, wait, did I just break production feeling? You can't buy that kind of confidence. Well, why? But you can build it in. All right, let's talk bonus tips. The fun stuff you pick up reading between the lines of the Anthropic article. There's a bunch of team-only workflows in there, but some of these little habits are surprisingly useful for solo iOS devs. First off, you don't have to settle for just one Claude window. Seriously, spin up multiple sessions. I've actually run with 3 at once. One's cranking out code, another is just reviewing and catching style issues. A third is running tests or scripts in the background. It sounds a bit overkill, but suddenly you're juggling a mini team of virtual assistants, and each one stays laser focused because the context isn't all jumbled together. Headless mode is another one of those, wait, I can do that discoveries. If you like automating things, maybe you're writing batch scripts, running tests in CI, or want Claude to scan your GitHub issues and auto-label stuff, you can totally script Claude to work in the background. For my main workflow, I don't use it every day, but for automating code reviews before every push, game changer. Here's a trick I love. Custom/commands. You build up a little library of your favorite prompts, like fix localization or WAD accessibility labels, and store them in .claude/commands. Next time you're facing a common chore, you just fire off a command instead of typing the whole prompt from scratch. It's a small thing, but it adds up, especially if you do a lot of repetitive indie work. Also, don't sleep on real CLI integrations. If you use the GitHub CLI, GH, Claude can actually help create PRs, triage issues, leave review comments. The whole works. Just make sure it's set up in your environment and watch it go. One thing that keeps biting me, and that Anthropic folks really hammer home, is how much better Claude works when you're super specific with your prompts. The more context you give, write tests for this Swift file, focus on login failures, don't use mocks, the more useful the results. Turns out, prompt engineering is just being a clear communicator, and yeah, it's a skill worth building. Oh, and here's a weird but genuinely cool one. Use Claude as your rubber duck at the end of a project. I'll literally ask, what actually worked well in my workflow? What would you tweak for next time? And Claude will spit back a mini retrospective, often picking up on patterns I didn't even notice myself. It's a strangely helpful way to close the loop and keep leveling up one app at a time. For solo devs, these little hacks aren't just about saving time. They're about making the solo grind feel more like a team sport, even when you're the only one on the field. So if I'm honest, the biggest shift for me is this. I'm done treating Claude or any AI tool like some fancy vending machine. For my next solo app, it's all about bringing AI in as a true teammate. I'm keeping Claude.md fresh, so every project is less where was I and more pick up right where I left off. I'm sticking to that explore, plan, code, review rhythm, even on small features, because it saves me from so much rework down the road. I automate as much of the boring stuff as I can, so my energy goes to the parts only I can build. And yeah, I'll let Claude riff on design, check accessibility, and double check my riskier changes. But I always give everything one last look myself. Most of all, I'm giving myself permission to keep evolving. The more I experiment, the more ways I find to make solo dev work feel a little more sustainable and sometimes, honestly, even fun. All right, so that's how I've been making the solo dev grind feel a bit less lonely using Claude, not just as a coding tool, but as an actual teammate. Honestly, it's changed how I approach my daily workflow, and it's genuinely made solo work more enjoyable. But now I want to hear from you. What's your own experience been like? Have you found any cool hacks with Claude or other AI tools that saved your sanity? Or did something totally crash and burn? Drop your stories in the comments because seriously, that's where the good stuff happens. And hey, if you found this helpful or just liked hanging out, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, or maybe share it with another indie dev who's wrestling with their workflow too. I try my best to jump into the comments and reply to everyone. Until next time, keep building, keep experimenting, and remember, solo dev doesn't mean you have to do this all by yourself. Peace.